Are we live? It says you're live. I'm always so nervous. This is only the second time though. But I'm always so nervous when you go live. It's like, this is for real. This is serious. Well, welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the office hours with Mr. Ian. Again, the idea of this is that you can come and ask me any questions that you have about English. When I make videos, I do try to make videos that I think are good for students and that will help students some useful information for learning English. But sometimes you have a specific question. And so if you have a specific question about English, I'm here to help you with that. For tonight's show, I'll be here waiting on some questions, but I have a couple of questions that have been asked of me as an English teacher. And I get at these students ask questions all the time. And I've been teaching English for over 13 years now. So you hear the same questions again and again and again. And so I'm going to take some of those questions that I've heard over the years and answer them for you. And hopefully that'll give you a little help in learning to speak English well and be more confident with it. But at any time, go ahead and put your question in the chat and I will address it in the best way that I can. I know not a lot about English, but I don't know everything. So if I can't answer it, I'll try and figure it out and maybe make a video about it. To go ahead and start while we have people joining here, I wanted to talk about Mother's Day. Happy Mother's Day yesterday to any of you mothers out there. It's a really, really tough job. I'm a dad. And being a dad is tough, but being a mom is different. Kids just rely on you for so much, and you have to go through so much more, even physically, in taking care of them. So I wanted to say thank you to the mothers that are out there, and also kind of tell you what I did for Mother's Day. And then we'll get started on the questions here in a few minutes after a couple of people have joined. My Mother's Day was kind of nice, but it's not for me, right? I did go visit my mother. My mother lives about an hour away from here, and I was able to take the kids. We have 5 children, my wife and I. Was able to take them to go see her. And you might think, well, aren't the children supposed to be with their mother? And it's funny, right? Because we spend so much time being parents throughout the year that Mother's Day is one day that we try to give a break. And so my wife got to take a break yesterday. So she had a nice quiet house that she could spend time in. And we did make her breakfast in bed and we bought her gifts. My kids went to we have a local store here that sells kind of cheap but nice things. And so we went there and each kid had a certain amount of money to spend on her. And it's really fun to see what they choose. So they presented her with their gifts. And then she had breakfast in bed. She really enjoys breakfast in bed on Mother's Day. Then we go to church like we usually do and set off from there. My wife was able to come home and enjoy some peace and quiet. And I took the kids to my mother's house. So I got to spend some time with my mother. And I bought her a plant I'd never heard of before. It was called a Miss Molly. A butterfly bush is what the tag said, but it was this really pretty thing. And my mother just moved into a new house recently. So she's able to take this and plant it in her garden, and hopefully it will grow into something nice that she can enjoy. So that was it. And we did call my grandmother to say hello. But I did want to say, again, thank you to all the moms out there. It's a really difficult job, and you guys are doing great at it. So you're really appreciated. All right. As we jump into the questions for tonight, if you have a question about English, please put it into the chat. Like I said, I have a list of a couple of questions here that students have asked me over the years that I'll talk about. But please, if you have a question, interrupt me, put it in the chat, and we'll talk about it. So, all right, let's jump into the very first question. The first question that I hear students ask all the time is, how can I improve my English? And it's a great question. And I appreciate the question because it means that people are trying to do better. They're trying to improve their English. And English is really not an easy language to learn. But I talk about it in 4 steps. There's the listening, speaking, reading, and writing. And each of those is a separate skill. And the only way to improve those skills is to do it and is to practice those skills. Just like if you want to learn to play an instrument, or if you want to learn to play a sport or be good at something, you have to practice. So there's really no shortcut to doing it. It is all hard work. Now, what kind of hard work will help you with that? Number one, watch my videos. um, no, do that. I think English classes are great. I teach an English class. I love being an English teacher, but there are things that you have to do outside of class to remember those ideas and to use those ideas. So, some things I recommend. Number one is reading. Reading is incredibly important for learning because when you go to class, your teacher will talk about phrases and idioms and phrasal verbs and grammar concepts. And if you are paying attention in class, you will also recognize those when you're reading. And the benefit of the reading allows you to reinforce, to make stronger your knowledge of those ideas. And it also lets you see it in a repeated fashion at your speed. When somebody's talking, you have to listen as fast as they talk. You don't have a choice. But when you're reading, you can take your time, you can slow down, you can understand the words at your speed. So I recommend reading for those things. I also recommend reading for pronunciation by reading out loud. I've got, do I have, I thought I had my French book here, but when I read in a different language, when I read in my head, it sounds beautiful. I have a beautiful accent in my head, but that's not how it sounds when I speak. When I speak, it's much more difficult. So I encourage students, if they want to improve, to read, but read out loud. Use your mouth. So you're practicing with those sounds to allow it to become more normal for you. Listening. How can you become a better listener? You can listen. And by this, podcasts are wonderful. YouTube is wonderful. My conversation videos with my wife that we produce, we have 7 of them so far, are wonderful. This gives you a chance to use your ears and gives you a chance to use your ears to identify the sounds. With subtitles too. I think subtitles are great because you can see the word and you can see how it's pronounced because English pronunciation is pretty crazy. Music, conversation. There are a lot of ways to listen. Podcasts are a great way to learn it. And podcasts are great too because you can slow those down. You can slow them down to 75% or 50% of um, the original speed, and that will help you. Now, I think it's kind of funny because if you slow it down too much, it sounds like they're drunk, but that's part of practicing too. All right. As far as speaking goes, there's really no substitute for just talking. All right. Oh, Julian, we got a question from Julian here. Ask about music. Music, yes. I think music is a fantastic way to learn. Be careful because in music, they use slightly different grammar sometimes and they'll use slightly different pronunciations because it is music, but it's a really, really good way to learn. And also because you enjoy it. If you enjoy something, you're going to spend more time doing it. So I think music is an excellent example. I want to say be careful because some music can be really fast. Even for me, there are some songs in English that I don't know the words for. And be careful not to be discouraged. Maybe choose songs that, yes, you like, but are a little bit slower, possibly. Maybe start with those. But if you enjoy it, listen to it, learn the words, sing along. I think music is great. Good point, Julian. Um, speaking, yeah. So speaking, conversation. There's no substitute for just talking to people. And this is a problem that I have when I speak languages, specifically French. I can read French pretty good and speak French pretty good. Sorry, I can listen to French pretty good and read it pretty good, but speaking's a problem. And it's simply because I don't speak it very much. So you have to find somebody to speak it with. And the best way to do that, you want to know the biggest secret, the easiest way to learn English is to fall in love with somebody who doesn't speak your language. You don't have to fall in love with an English speaker. You just need to fall in love with somebody who doesn't speak your language, who also wants to learn English. Because when you do that, you will have such motivation to speak English that you will study and study and study. One of the greatest examples I've ever had was a student. I had a male student from Japan and a female student from Ecuador. He spoke Japanese. She spoke Spanish. They did not speak each other's languages. So what did they do? They spoke in English. And they became almost fluent in about 6 months to a year, almost fluent because their desire to spend time with each other was so strong that they just spoke it all the time. So, no substitute for that. And like I say, there are things that you can do, but a lot of it is just hard work. I recently heard a colleague of mine say that it has to be like a lifestyle. Your life is in English. So, I sort of talk to my students if I see their phone is in not English, is in Spanish or French or Arabic. Say, well, come on, what are we doing? Right? You need to be practicing it all the time if it's important to you. All right, so that a couple ways on how you can improve your English there. And I'll repeat this again. If you do have a question about English, go ahead and put it in the chat there. I'm happy to talk about those tonight. All right, next question that students ask me all the time is, Mr. Ian, what is the difference between will and going to? All right. The difference between will and going to is pretty simple. It's not that important. um, Students are really, really concerned about the difference between will and going to. But I'll be honest with you. Most of the time that we speak English, it does not matter. In about 95% of the situations in English, it's not important. Is there a difference? Yes, there is a difference. We use will more with spontaneous decisions. So if my family calls me, they say, Dad, we need your help. I look at you and say, I'll be right back. Whew, because I made that decision right now. Or if your friend calls and says, Hey, can you come over? I need some help right now. Yeah, I'll be right there. It's more natural to use in um, in spontaneous ideas. Going to is more plans, things that you're thinking about doing in the future. Like my wife and I were looking at vacation plans. Where are we going to go this summer? Or what are you going to do this weekend? What are your plans? So there is a difference. And as you experience English, you'll learn that. And so I hope that you will um, not think about it too much now. That's my hope. Because I don't want you to stand in the supermarket and you're waiting to talk to the manager and you say, Oh no, is it will? Is it going to? Oh no, which one is it? I can't remember. I don't want you to do that. So, will and going to, yes, there's a difference, but most of the time it does not matter. All right, let's look at the next question here. Next question is tipping. My students have a lot of questions about tipping. Now, I usually tell my students that in American culture, in English class, yes, I'm teaching you English, but I'm also teaching you about American culture. And if you're learning English in a different country for England or Scotland or Ireland or Australia, The rules are different. Those countries don't use tipping, they have a more European model. But if you are in the United States, tipping is pretty confusing. Tipping is pretty difficult. Even as a native speaker, the cultural idea of giving money for free for service, and how was the service? Was it really good service? Was it 10% service or 20% service? Was the waiter having a bad day? Somebody in his family sick? Are they in a bad mood? Was the bad service because they're really tired because they worked last night, or what? There's so many things to think about. I think it's a terrible way to finish a meal, but that's how we live. That's America. So, a couple of scenarios, a couple of instances I'll give you for tipping. The number one is percentage. Students always ask about this and they usually get it wrong. Percentage for restaurants, which is where you will most likely tip, is 20%. Is 20%. And that seems like a lot, especially if you come from a culture that doesn't tip. But that's for regular standard service. The waiter or waitress did their job, they had a good attitude, they helped you. Standard service is 20%. If you want to tip more, you're welcome to tip more. If you want to tip less, you are also able to tip less, but again, we don't recommend that. So 20% if you are at a restaurant. Hold on, I'm getting some feedback here. Can you guys hear me? Because I'm not getting any feedback on my microphone. Um, is that, if anybody can let me know if you are able to hear me right now? I think I might be having a problem with my microphone. Okay, I've got a yes. Fantastic. Because the little bars at the bottom that tell me, you know, how much volume there is at zero. It's at nothing. So thank you. Thank you. All right. So tipping a restaurant, 20%. If you're not sitting in the restaurant, you can usually use 10% for delivery or pickup of an order. And sometimes it feels weird because you go, well, I didn't sit down, I didn't have service, but still customary. And the reason is something that people don't know a lot of. If you work in a restaurant in the United States, your level of income is much lower. Your minimum wage is much lower. So I think the American minimum wage is around 7.25. It's different from state to state, $7.25. But if you work in a restaurant, it's only $2.13. So the people at the restaurant don't really get paid very much at all from the restaurant. They make most of their money from tips. So it is important that you are tipping in American culture. It is a way to make good friends. If you repeat business at a place and you tip well, people will remember you. I promise. It's a great way to do that, and also to break this idea that that foreigners don't tip. This is a very strong idea in American culture. And if you visit a restaurant that has mainly Americans working in it, you may feel that. You may feel that they don't pay attention to you as much as they do the American guest. And it's because of this idea that foreigners don't tip as much as Americans do. So hopefully over time, we can break this idea of tipping versus American versus foreigners for tipping. Now that being said, I used to work for a tipping job, and I used to have a little scale in my head of who tipped the most. And it's true, people will give you better service if they think you are providing a tip. So one way to make sure that you get good service is to tip. It's a way to build relationships with the people there that I think is really, really it's beneficial, especially a local place. If you have a place that is owned by people in your community, that's a great way to do it, to keep money in your community. Like, for example, my hair. I need a haircut. I'm getting pretty fuzzy on this side, but um, I get my hair cut at a very local place, and I used to get my hair cut for like $12. It's pretty cheap. This place charges more, but I want to spend more money there. Not because I have a lot of money, because I am a teacher. Don't forget, but I feel good having that money in my community. And so tipping there and having good relationships with the people there is always a good thing. I don't think you can go wrong by doing that. All right, let's talk about the next question. The next question, and again, feel free. If you have a question, put it in the chat. We'll talk about it. Um, I'm here to help. This is the idea of office hours. Office hours is so you can come and talk to me. I usually hang out until 8:30 at the moment. As more people show up, if there are more questions, we'll talk about them. We will talk about those questions for as long as you want help. All right. The next question that students ask a lot is do and make. So I think this comes, it depends on what language you come from. If you come from a Romance language like Italian or French or Spanish, this is a really difficult question because in those languages, you only have one word for do or make. So when you come to English, you kind of have to decide every time, is it do or is it make? Let me give you some good news. The good news is it doesn't really matter. Most of the time, when you use it, people understand you. All right. So, an example would be do the dishes or do your homework. If you say make the dishes or make your homework, yeah, it sounds weird. It does. It sounds weird. But we completely understand you and we're not going to make fun of you. I think Americans are pretty forgiving with people who speak other languages. I think Americans are pretty patient as far as trying to understand people from other languages and helping them. So it works. So, like will and going to, I don't want you to spend a lot of time thinking about it. I would prefer if you just used it. All right. Now, there are kind of rules for it. We use make more when things are created, and we use do more with other things that are more jobs. But those rules are broken all the time because we have so many expressions that use these words. So there's not a lot to say there, except I do recommend this is a reason I recommend reading and I recommend listening to real, authentic English sources. It's good to practice with your friends, but there's no, um, what's the word? There's nothing better than reading and listening to real natural English. So when you do that, you will see these. And over time, you will hear this again and again and again. You'll hear people say, make the bed, make the bed. Oh, yesterday I made the bed. Oh, tomorrow I'll make the kids make their bed. And you say, oh, they use make with this. All right. Um, this happened to me a lot when I lived in Indonesia. So they use different words to describe actions. And one of them for medicine was they don't take medicine like we do in English, they drink medicine. And I had to learn to say drink. All right. And again, let me pause here for a second. If you do have a question, please go ahead and put it in the chat. Happy to answer any questions that you have here. We've got about 5 minutes left in the stream, unless there are some other questions, but happy to answer them. That's why I'm here. So when I lived in Indonesia, they used different verbs for actions. And so they wouldn't take medicine, they would drink medicine. And this is really strange for me as an American because in America, we don't drink medicine. I guess you can with a liquid, but many of our medicines are not liquid. So we don't drink them, we take them. But I had to learn to say, I had to learn to say, drink medicine. And it's just part of it. But I learned that by paying attention. When I went to the pharmacy, they didn't say take the medicine, they said drink the medicine. even if it was a pill. When I went to the doctor, he would talk about drinking medicine. So I paid attention. I didn't learn that in a book. I simply paid attention to what people were saying. And that's probably the best way to learn English is just to simply really pay attention. Some of the greatest success stories in learning English has been people who just watch TV and play video games and really pay attention to how other people talk. So I think it's a great thing to do. All right, last question here, and we'll wrap this up. We'll finish this unless there are some other questions here in the chat. How can I talk to people? People are usually very nervous to try a language. But I've got good news for you. If you live in America, really any English speaking country, but America in particular is really forgiving. I mentioned this earlier tonight. They're really forgiving and they're really understanding of people trying to learn English. And yes, you will find people who are not nice and who are not patient. But for the most part, in my experience and in talking to people who move to America, they talk about how Americans are very friendly and they really want to help and they really try to help understand. Even to a bad point, because I had a student recently who said that she lived in Florida for a long time and she would talk to her neighbor and her neighbor was very nice, but would never fix her language, would never correct her language. So when she came to me, I was correcting her a lot the first few days. And she was very thankful. She's, "Oh, thank you, Mr. Ian, for correcting me because, my neighbor in Florida never corrected me." So you need that. You need a little bit of correction. And sometimes Americans are too forgiving. They allow you to make mistakes that you should learn not to make. But for the most part, I think Americans are pretty forgiving, pretty nice, and relaxed about language learners. Now, what's a good way to talk to Americans? It kind of depends on where you live in the United States. I've lived in a couple of places. Some places are friendlier than others. Most of America, I think, is pretty friendly. But if you live in a place that is kind of not, if nobody talks to each other, that might be difficult. But where I live, and for most of the country, if someone's standing there, you simply say hello. Recently, we've had a change in the weather, and you ask about the weather or ask them what they're doing there. Um, you can even say something nice to them, give them a compliment. Say, "Hey, I really like your jacket," or "I really like your shoes." Things like that can bring people out. It makes them smile. It makes them happy. Um, and also, if you're in a situation where you have time to volunteer, I think volunteering is a great way to learn English. If you're able to work, fantastic. But if you can't work or if you're studying a lot, then volunteering at a place that speaks English is good because you'll be forced to make those conversations in English. Most of it's just bravery and it's just courage. And I talked about this with my wife on our last conversational video that it's hard to be brave. It really, really is. But that's sort of the only way that you can be brave is when there's something scary. If nothing is scary, then you can't really be brave. There's no need for bravery. And you deciding to learn a new language and you deciding to move to a country where people speak it, and then you deciding to talk to somebody who speaks that language that you're not confident with is a really wonderful thing. So I want to encourage you if you're waiting for if you're waiting in line somewhere, or if you're waiting at the grocery store to pay, or if you're standing outside waiting for a store to open, most Americans are happy to talk. Um, they might be on their phones though, but that's just something about living today. So we are about to hit the 30-minute mark here. Let me take a drink of water. I'm going to go ahead and finish this stream. We're about to hit 8:30. Unless there are some questions, if you do have a question, please put it in the chat. I'm happy to stay for a little while if there are any questions to answer. I hope that the questions that I spoke about tonight were good, and I hope that they helped you. And if you're joining late, feel free to watch it from the beginning. It will stay on YouTube after this. You can watch it whenever you like. But I'll give a couple more moments. If anybody has a question, please put it in the chat, and I'll be happy to answer it. And again, I'm planning to continue to do this. Monday nights are good for me. I might choose a different night, but I am here to answer questions for you because, like I said at the beginning, my videos are designed to help people learn English. And so I try to think about things that are helpful for people learning English. But everybody has specific questions. Everybody has, mystery and how do I pronounce this or this? Last week in the stream, we talked about a student who was asking about the P sound like in puppy or potato, and the B sound like in bottle or barbecue. And that's a specific question that she has, and that not everybody has that question. So if you do have specific questions, please put it in the chat, and I'm really happy to answer it. Sometimes I call myself a professional question answerer because that's all teaching is, right? Introducing a subject, giving some instruction, and then allowing students to question you and allowing students to understand through their questions. So I'll give just another minute if anybody wants to put anything in the chat, and then we'll finish for tonight. And by the way, I was updating my characters back here. If you like, I'm a big Avatar fan, as you can probably tell. I've got All Might and the Mandalorian over here, but I put a little scene up here. I got the whole gang now, so I've got Sokka, Aang, Zuko, Katara, and Toph. So we got them. Everybody's together, and that's good. Well, all right, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for being here. If you're watching this in the future, thank you for watching in the future. Please make sure you're subscribed so you see when these live streams are happening. And I'll see you next week. Thank you guys so much for being here. We'll see you next time. Bye.